Hello, folks, and welcome to the A to Z Sports Big Orange Podcast. I am Charlie Burris, here as always with my co-host Zach Ragan, writer for A to Z Sports. Wherever you listen throughout the world, we thank you so much for listening to us. We talk all things Vols every week here on the Big Orange Podcast. And if you want to listen to that on the regular, go to the A to Z Sports Podcast Network feed on iTunes, Spotify, and subscribe, because then you won't miss the episodes when we drop them on usually Mondays. This week on a Tuesday because of July 4th. Shout out to America. At Charlie_Burris, at Zach TNT, at A to Z Sports on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook.com/A to Z Sports Nashville, and A to Z Sports.com for all the stuff that we write. And then the big one, the one that's been blowing up, dude, YouTube. Go to youtube.com, search up A to Z Sports, and you can see everything here. We're going to have pictures on the show today, so you can go to the YouTube and see them. We'll talk about that in just a second, what we're going to show. But YouTube, subscribe, and the episodes are there in all their glory, plus a bunch of content about the Titans. Everything else that A to Z Sports is there. All the other stuff that A to Z Sports does is there. Don't know why I can't speak. Well, let's get to it, Zach. Tons of recruiting news, but let's start with something fun that I think a lot of people will be happy about, and it is happening quite literally as we are speaking right now. This is breaking news. We need that like nightly news music. The Vols letters, the VOLS, the classic Vols letters that were taken down so long ago, was a true travesty. With these letters being taken off at Neyland Stadium way back in the day, they are back. Danny White came through. Look at this right here, Zach. This is from a tweet from, I think, WATE, maybe, just to give them credit. Look, so nice, Zach. Good.
Oh.
Hey, what's up, man?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like maybe this is what breaks the curse, right? I mean,
will this
the
finally
letters
do it?
I mean, one, I don't understand why they ever came down, and two, why they didn't go back up after so much fan demand. Although this works out for Danny White because he looks like a hero for doing something incredibly obvious. But let's see, what it was 1999. Was that when the letters came down?
That sounds right.
Initially, it was after the championship. I think it was 99. I think it was after the 98 season and the new Jumbotron and all that went up.
Yeah.
I believe that's correct. Maybe there's some better Vols historians that listen that can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But, I mean, look, that coincides with kind of the downfall. It wasn't dramatic. Tennessee had some great years after winning the championship in 98. They should have won the championship in 2001.
Yeah,
with that season. And the 2004 season was a really fun season, but it started going downhill after that. So maybe this is what finally kind of breaks the curse. You got a high scoring offense. You got those Vols letters. It's starting to feel like 98 again. Maybe.
Can we put that phrase to bed? Is it time? I mean,
it's been 24 years, so it might be.
24 years. I think it might be time.
Especially now. Look, now that Georgia has won the championship, because that was the thing, right? 1980. 1980. Every time a Georgia fan said something, 1980. You can't do that anymore. I mean, you just can't. All the big SEC programs, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Auburn, LSU, they've all won national championships since Tennessee. So Tennessee fans, I mean, I hate it, but you got to sit this one out when it comes to talking trash to those programs now.
We need a new year. Feels like 2022.
There you go.
2023. One of these upcoming years, we need to get back to double-digit wins. I mean, that would be the place to
That's step one.
start.
Step one. I mean, It's been 15 years since Tennessee's won 10 games. 15 years. That's unbelievable. In 2007, if you'd have told me that's the last time Tennessee's going to win 10 games in a season for 15 years, I would not have been able to believe it at all.
It is a true tragedy. I honestly should have never been this way, but here the letters are back. VOLS is back. And so is this what everybody always says about Texas? Is Tennessee football back? No, the Vol letters are back. Is this what it took?
Well, Philip Fulmer says the Vols were back in what early 2020 after that 8-5 season.
Oh God,
he has
I forgot that happened.
There's been a lot that's happened since then, so it's understandable.
They were not, in fact, back at that point.
Fulmer, after he returned as the Tennessee's athletic director, he had 2 quotes that will stay with him forever. There was that one, the famous "Well, the Vols are back" clip, and then at the press conference where they announced that Jeremy Pruitt was fired, and he absentmindedly said, "Well, the recruiting's been good." And then there was a long pause where he kind of realized what he had said. It's like, well, it's kind of the reason you're firing your head coach right now is because the recruiting's been good.
Oh man,
but
that is okay. Yeah, I mean,
yeah, we can retire. Vols are back. I think
you could do a whole episode. I think probably more. You could do like a whole television series on the legacy of Phil Fulmer at Tennessee. It is complicated at this point. Unfortunately, it shouldn't have been. But it is now. And man, that Tennessee's back comment. I forgot. I'd put it out of my brain. I had wiped it clean. Don't need to think about it. Don't remember that he said that. Now it's back. Thanks, Zach. Thanks a lot, man.
Hey, look. Listen, if Tennessee if they beat Florida this year, if they start off like 5-1 or something, that clip's going to be played on Twitter. Oh yeah, you're going to see it.
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so too.
I mean, at that point I wouldn't mind it because at that point it might actually feel like the Vols back if you're going to beat Florida. And
if you're a Tennessee fan, after everything that's happened the last 15, 20 years, opposing fan bases can't hurt you. You've been through too much. You were conditioned for this. So yeah, lean all the way into it. Have fun with it. Don't be cautiously optimistic. Just go all in because what's another a fall from grace here? What's another disastrous season? Been through a ton of those. We can handle it if it happens, but have fun with it. Deserve to have some fun.
It's one of those, like a guy's about to retire and he's thinking about doing something to work and you go like, what are you going to do? Fire me? Yeah. That's how it feels as a Tennessee fan. You've done this for so long. You're like, what are you going to do? Give me a 4-win season? I've been there.
Yeah, done that.
What are you gonna do? Yeah. Although I don't. Let's not speak anything worse into existence. Don't tempt fate by taunting. There's nothing worse that could happen. I'm sure there is.
There is always something worse. But I still have that mindset. It's kind of like in Planes, Trains, Automobiles, where he says, I've lived with Dale, whatever his name is. I can handle anything. We've been through the Butch Jones era. We can handle anything. We've been through Jeremy Pruitt. We can handle anything.
I think so. But just wanted to throw that in there. Hopefully it does. The good vibes. The curse is lifted. This is the year. Finally, Tennessee. We say it every year. Next year's is the year. Well, that'll be it. Next year. Maybe next year is the year. Because we said that a few weeks ago with baseball and basketball. The next year finally came. You won the championship. You won the SEC championship. You had a magical season in baseball. So maybe the next year will finally come for Tennessee football with the letters going back up on Neyland Stadium. But with that said, recruiting news. So much happened this week over the holiday, July 4th. You had commitments from so far, because this isn't really the end for the week, but so far, 4 different players where Tennessee was huge in the mix. Tennessee got 3 of the 4, although the one that they didn't get was pretty important. But let's start here. This was my favorite one. And out of this whole set of players, and it was not the highest rated recruit, but it was the one that I enjoyed getting the commitment from the most, and that was Christian Conyer, an athlete from South Warren High School in Bowling Green, Kentucky, which actually my cousin went to South Warren. I know my wife went to Western Kentucky University, familiar with that area. And the thing that was great about his commitment to Tennessee was that the predictions from analysts it was close. It was really, really close. But the predictions were really that he was going to go to Kentucky. which would have sucked. You don't want to lose a recruit to Kentucky, although the kid is from Kentucky. Bowling Green is not too close to Lexington, but nonetheless, you don't want to lose a recruit to a team that you beat perennially. And Tennessee did not lose. They beat out Kentucky for Christian Conyers' services. This was great. So the mad tweeting from Kentucky fans was so awesome. What did you think about Conyer committing?
Oh, I mean, the tweeting from Kentucky fans was fun. Matt Jones, Kentucky Sports Radio guy, that we've talked about Kentucky Sports Radio and how entertaining that can be at times. He was really tweeting through it. He's having some tough times. He didn't directly blame it on NIL, but he seemed to suggest that a lot with his tweets. But my favorite was the Kentucky tight ends coach.
Oh, yeah.
Vince Marrow, I believe is his name.
Mm-hmm.
He tweeted, kind of subtweeted about it and said, whatever, we'll see those guys in a few months. But what was wild about that is his daughter was getting ready to get married. I mean, his tweet right before that was, best day of my life, fixing to walk my daughter down the aisle. And he, in the midst of all that, he has to send a subtweet kind of bemoaning the loss of this player to Tennessee. I mean, that is fantastic. You're all in Kentucky's head at this point, from their coaching staff to their fan base to their biggest media person in Matt Jones. It's beautiful because Matt Jones hates Tennessee so much. He takes underhanded shots at Tennessee every chance he gets, especially when it comes to basketball. But even in football, they try to, because they've had some success under Mark Stoops, but they haven't really had much success against Tennessee. So this was really, I mean, I'm with you. That was my favorite one of the week too, just because of the reaction from Kentucky fans.
Yeah, I mean, the kid's a good prospect. He's the number 36 athlete in America, the number 5 player in Kentucky, according to On3. I believe one of the services had him as the top player in Kentucky.
Yeah, he's a 4-star on some of the services. So I mean, probably going to be a cornerback. That's a good, Tennessee needs cornerbacks. They need players in the secondary too. So
yeah,
you get a good player and you steal it from Kentucky. Something you should be doing anyway. But hey, wouldn't have been shocking to see him go to Kentucky, especially with NIL deals flying around. It's the in-state school. It's going to happen. But yeah, it's pretty satisfying.
But these were, I looked, back-to-back tweets from Vince Marrow, Kentucky. He says, walking my daughter down the aisle today. God is good. Hey, congratulations to Vince's daughter. That is great. And then the very next tweet, let's see, what is the time difference? 3:07 p.m. for the first one. And then 4:20, so an hour and a half later, 4:28 on the next one. And then he says, about to enjoy the biggest day of my life. You shouldn't have put that in there. You shouldn't have put that in there.
No.
That was a mistake. Because the Tennessee fans would have never known to look. I mean, I'm sure some would have found it and been like, look, he's sweet. But he threw in about to enjoy the biggest day of my life. We will see them dudes in a few months. Go Big Blue. Bro, what are you doing? What are you? Just don't tweet. You can just do. It's this easy. Just don't tweet that. And then it's that.
I don't understand, because these coaches, they typically show so much restraint in media interviews.
Seriously.
And media sessions. They don't talk about recruiting at all, obviously, but they get on Twitter and they have the need to say something. It happens all the time. I mean, we've seen this a ton, where these kind of subtweets come from coaches that miss out. It's never a good look. Never. Wish the kid well and move on. You're going to lose some of those battles. Alabama loses battles. Georgia loses battles. There's so many. We'll talk about this more in a minute, I'm sure, but there's so many things. There's only so much a school can do when it comes to recruiting. I'm sure Kentucky did everything right. I'm sure they built a good relationship with the kid. They thought they had a good shot. There's probably not a lot more they could have done. The kid just preferred Tennessee. Tennessee also lost out on players recently last week. Same deal. I mean, you can't control ultimately where a player wants to go.
You really can't. And this, I just don't. Why would you do this? It's still just so funny. He followed it up even from then. I haven't seen this. He said at almost 10 o'clock that night, I assume maybe the wedding is still going on at that point if it's a really long wedding.
They might have had to postpone it.
So much Dad's having a breakdown.
Yeah.
Call it off. He said, I have much respect for that young man. I'm happy when any kid goes to college, whether, and he spelled it weather like the Weather Channel, whether it's Kentucky or any other school. It's football, not life and death. Back to my daughter's important day. Go Big Blue. Like, again, what if you just didn't? What if you didn't say anything? Like,
that makes it worse.
Vince, why? Like, you have to know if his daughter knows, and she might have just been wrapped up in the day and not realized that any of this ever happened. Who knows? But you got to, like, if my dad had done this on my wedding day, tweeted in the middle, I would give him grief about that for the rest of my life. I mean, that would be, what were you doing? You couldn't, for one day, you couldn't just put it down. You couldn't put the phone down. Really? During the off season. And I bet you anything that girl got married at this specific time because dad could come.
Oh, yeah.
Like, she can't get married during the fall because dad can't be there.
It's the deadest part. I mean, it's a dead period, I believe, in recruiting right now, where it's the deadest part of the year in college football. So yeah, I'm sure that's specifically the reason.
And he's still tweeting through it. So congrats to him on the wedding, and congrats to Tennessee on Christian Conyer. That was definitely our favorite get of the weekend. But you also had defensive lineman out of Douglasville, Georgia, Tyree Weathersby, a 3-star. The number 64 defensive lineman, according to the 247 Sports Composite, the number 50 player out of the state of Georgia, and the number 530 player in the class of 2023. But defensive help that you need. I don't think that you can discount that at all, even though it's a 3-star player. You need the depth. You need the bodies right there, even if the kid isn't an absolute killer, although I like the tape that I saw of him. So I like this pickup too. Any thoughts on Tyree?
I think, you're building depth. You're hoping that it's a guy that can contribute. You're not expecting him to come in and be an all SEC type player. But then again, we've had that happen before. We've seen it with players like Cam Sutton and some other Emmanuel Mosley, some 3-star guys that come in and end up starting and playing a big role and making it to the NFL. Recruiting rankings matter. They're more often than not pretty spot on, but they do miss sometimes. And, maybe this is one where they like this tape. I don't think Tennessee's going to take commitments right now in July from a 3-star player unless they really like him. And you got to trust their evaluation on that. I know that's hard to hear for Tennessee fans. I've seen a lot of comments, 3-star you. I mean, I'm seeing that all the time. I don't understand those complaints. Tennessee has the number 10 recruiting class in the country right now. Obviously, Alabama's behind them. They're going to jump over them, of course. There's a lot of guys they're waiting on that won't make their decisions till later. They'll be top 5 like always. But look, Ole Miss, Kentucky, South Carolina, they're all way, way, way below Tennessee in the recruiting rankings. I mean, it's not even close. Ole Miss is at 60. Missouri at 58, Kentucky at 54, Vanderbilt at 52. If I was below Vanderbilt, I think I'd be reconsidering my strategies moving forward. Oof. But you've got all these teams that are not recruiting nearly as well as Tennessee. LSU at number 15, they're kind of ignoring the state of Louisiana right now. I think that's a big misstep by Brian Kelly down there. So it's not like Tennessee's recruiting bad. I don't think that there's any reason to be upset. I mean, considering what Josh Heupel walked into, and you got the number 10 class in the country, you got maybe the best quarterback in the country committed, you're going to have to take some of these 3-star guys until you start winning 10 games a year. That's the only thing that's going to get you over the hump to where you routinely land 4- and 5-star guys where it's not just an outlier that you got a guy.
Yeah, it just is what it is for the time being. But I guess we can go straight into the conversation here that I think most people were thinking about over the weekend after sort of the fun of that Christian Conyer situation and things. So 5-star offensive lineman Francis Mauigoa makes his decision on July 4th. And it came down to Tennessee and Miami. And he chooses Miami. And a lot of people thought he was going to choose Tennessee. He has a really, really good relationship with Nico Iamaleava, and people were really feeling like he might come to Tennessee. Obviously, Miami in kind of a similar situation to Tennessee, except even like a year behind. They just got a new coach, supposedly, and this is really probably what can be talked about here. Huge NIL money flowing through Miami right now. They are doing it big, and so you lose out on him to Miami. And I think, yeah, a lot of people over the weekend were like, well, it's back to 3-star U. Here we go again. It's over. Why did we ever even get our hopes up about blah, 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 blah? Is it over, Zach? Is it back to 3-star U? Were we flying too close to the sun thinking that NIL could get Tennessee all of these 5-star players in the door, or what's the deal?
Well, I think there's a lot of confusion out there right now because when Tennessee landed Nico, it was like, okay, they're setting the standard when it comes to NIL. And we talked about that a little bit. And the feeling is that Danny White maybe pulled the reins in a little bit on the NIL stuff. There was the statement that he made to VolQuest with the interview where he doesn't really want NIL mixing with recruiting. Came right after the NCAA kind of talked about cracking down on collectives and how they're defined and their communications with the recruits, and that's not supposed to be happening. And obviously we know it is, but Tennessee's in a weird spot where they haven't got their notice of allegations from the NCAA. The feeling is that they'll be fine, that it won't be that major because of the way they cooperated, but I can understand Danny White's hesitancy. You don't want to bury yourself in a big hole and not be able to get out of it because you made things worse. I don't know that the NCAA would be able to do anything to Tennessee. I don't think so because they're losing power by the day. But I can somewhat understand not wanting to flirt with disaster there. So Tennessee doesn't really want to get caught up in anything with recruits. Now, it seems like Tennessee is kind of focusing on, instead of spending on recruits, spending on current players. And that's a strategy that I think it's kind of what's happening at Ole Miss right now. I think that's why Ole Miss is so far down the recruiting rankings. Lane Kiffin's really using the transfer portal to fill some needs. Tennessee might need to consider leaning on that over the next couple of years because NIL is going to be such a weird thing. You've got all this money that you want to spend on these players that have never played in college. You don't know how they're going to turn out. You're going to get burnt. Every program out there is going to get burnt. For every 4-star and 5-star guy that pans out, there's going to be a Drew Richmond that you land and you pay big money for, and he's just a flop. There's going to be a Harrison Bailey that's a 5-star guy that comes in and just doesn't perform like you expected him to. That stuff's going to happen. People that are funding all this, how long are they going to let that go? They're not just going to hand out money to players they're not sure about. So for a program like Tennessee, where they're kind of trying to rebuild, they're not Alabama and Georgia where they can kind of control who they get. They just got to write a check and they know what they're getting. They might need to rely on keeping players in the program first. That's going to be very important. And we saw Tennessee do that last year with Tyler Barron, who hit the portal. Looks like he was probably convinced to stay by some NIL deals. Hendon Hooker could have went pro, probably would have been drafted in the later rounds. If he wanted to go ahead and get to the NFL, make a couple $100,000 a year, maybe more, could have maybe went that route. But we know he got a pretty good NIL deal to stick around. So maybe they need to start focusing their attention there. And then, these 3-star guys that don't sign an NIL deal to commit, and he ends up going to Missouri and being a star. Okay, when that guy hits the portal, that's the ones you want to really bid on because you know what you're going to get. So I kind of understand why there's some hesitancy here to spend big on certain prospects. Though I do think a 5-star offensive lineman is an exception I probably would have made because you got to have that left tackle to protect your quarterback. You have to have that guy.
This loss hurts for sure. It hurts way more than the whole Carnell Tate situation to me. Because first of all, you lost Miami. It was another recovering program. I mean, Miami has just been floundering for basically a very similar amount of time to Tennessee.
Yeah.
They had success maybe a little bit longer than Tennessee or a little bit later into the 2000s than Tennessee did. But to lose out in this arena right now to another program that's kind of in a similar position to you is what is brutal. And you think Miami has a lot of shine to it right now. And this is some factors that are, I think, haven't been considered much because we think of everything just in terms of the SEC. We think like, okay, how much shine does Knoxville have compared to Starkville? A lot, because Knoxville has civilization around it, and some things like that. But if you're competing with a school that's outside of the SEC, like Miami is sexy, man. This is a big city with a lot going on. And
a lot of NIL opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, clearly they got into huge trouble way back in the day, and I'm sure that those people are still hanging around. The people that got them into the trouble before, and I'm sure they have new ones now. There's just a ton of money in Miami right now. It obviously during the whole the pandy, it got real popular. A lot of moving there, and just a lot going on makes it a really attractive city want to go live in. That school is in like the nicest part of town. It's not even really in Miami proper. It's in whatever, right outside of there. I can't think of the exact name of it, but
Coral
anyway.
Gables. Is it Coral Gables?
Coral Gables. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I believe the stadium that they play in is like in the middle of everything down there. And like there's just some factors like that where that kid is already living in Florida. He's at IMG Academy. Hopefully Niedermeyer is not in his ear. Brian Niedermeyer is down there bad-mouthing Tennessee probably. He was on Pruitt's staff for anybody that doesn't know, and we talked about him last week. He's a clown. But the kid was already in Florida, probably got a really nice pitch from Miami with Cristobal there, and it's just not going to be that easy. It's not going to be just like here's $7 million, come on down. It's going to be Miami going, here's $7 million from us, and you get to live in Miami. It's never going to be cold. There's no seasons here. It's Miami, and you can get a Lamborghini and drive around, and there's tons of women on the beach in bikinis here, and it's all of this stuff that Miami has to offer. That what are we supposed to do about something like that? And I think there's factors at work there in that way too that you have to consider, and it's tough. It's gonna be a battle, and you just have to win it however you can. I would agree. This might have been a situation where you go, we're really gonna up the ante because we need a kid like this to be the foundation of this class. But woulda, coulda, shoulda. It is what it is.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's going to be hard. I mean, that stuff is going to really come into play with NIL deals, and as the college football kind of moves away from amateurism and that model and moves more into being a professional job. I mean, it's why Lincoln Riley left Oklahoma to go to USC.
Yep.
I mean, it wasn't so much that he was scared of the SEC. I don't really buy that narrative at all. I mean, sure, it's easier to win in the Pac-12, and now he's moving to the Big Ten. I don't know if he had any idea that move was coming or not, but it's Los Angeles. You got NIL deals like crazy out there. You're in Hollywood. That's where the money is. And no, it's not a small college town. It's not the biggest sport in town. It's not even close to the biggest sport in town. But there's still a lot of money flowing out there, and Miami is kind of like the Los Angeles of the East Coast when it comes to sports. I mean, that's just the way it is. So that is going to be tough, but it's not all doom and gloom. There are lots of other great college towns. That's still what a lot of kids want. Not every kid's going to be fleeing or trying to get to South Beach. And other programs like Mississippi State, pretty much every program in the SEC outside of Vanderbilt has got the same kind of town that they're dealing with and the same challenges that they'll have to be dealing with.
Yeah, it's a pretty level playing field inside the SEC. There's no... I mean, like LSU is kind of close to New Orleans. That's about as good as it gets. And, Vandy would be attractive in Nashville if their program wasn't a garbage dump,
Yeah, if it wasn't Vanderbilt. I think that almost works out, even though it's a couple hours away. I think that works out more to Tennessee's advantage.
Absolutely.
Being 2 hours away from Nashville. In fact, I believe it was Nico that said something about how, I don't think it was Nico, it was another recruit, recently given an interview about Tennessee, and he mentioned the proximity to Nashville as being part of his decision-making process. So I think it's definitely a factor.
That's interesting. I hadn't seen that, but yeah, I could absolutely see that. Kids care about that stuff. They do, especially if you're bringing these kids in and giving them a bunch of money. They're going to go like, well, what can I do with my money?
Yeah.
I can go out in Miami, go to these clubs that are on South Beach, go eat at like world-class restaurants and do, all of this stuff that they got down there. They're just
Are you saying that Dollywood is not that big of a pool for recruiting?
We gotta get Dolly in here working on behalf of the NIL, don't we?
Yeah.
She needs to come to some of those meetings and lay down some cash. That's what a missed opportunity so far. Dollywood is pretty sweet. Make no mistake about that. I mean, Gatlinburg, I would say this from growing up, Gatlinburg is bigger now than I probably ever thought it would be. So
I know. I mean, I've been going to Gatlinburg since I was a small child, and it's insane how much it's changed over the years.
I mean, this is an aside here, but I mean, we went all the time as kids. Grew up in Knoxville for most of my life. Moved here when I was 5 from Nashville. And that's just we would go to Dollywood and we would go to Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg and all that stuff, and we got really disillusioned with it. By the time I was like 16, I was like, I will never go to Gatlinburg ever again. I can't believe that people actually go and vacation there. It's freaking blown up. It's huge now.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, bigger than I probably ever thought it would be. In Dollywood, they got like a huge resort up there now. Yeah, come on, Dollywood, help out. We know you got big bucks up there. Come on, need a deal with what is it, the Dreammore Resort or whatever it's called that they got up there now. Come on,
there's all kinds of stuff over there. Maybe
Ripley's, believe it or not, throwing around some NIL money.
Margaritaville Resort or over there in Pigeon Forge.
Jimmy Buffett, he's right up the road. Come on,
Yeah.
Paula Dean's got a place up there.
Where's
that Paula Dean money? But anywho, like I said, that's an aside. But there's just some things like that where what are we supposed to do? We can't move Tennessee to a giant metropolis like Miami. So some of these things are going to happen. I don't want to make excuses. You have to win some of these. It's got to be more than Nico right now. And it seems like the sentiment for Shandavian Bradley is really good. It seems like Tennessee's in a really nice position, but you got to close out there.
Yeah, I hesitate to even say that because I said that about Carnell Tate and Mauigoa, and it
I thought Mauigoa was coming
both times. And look, I got to talk about this a little bit because I tweeted yesterday when they missed. I tweeted, missing on Francis Mauigoa is brutal for Tennessee. No other way to put it. That was what the Vols needed. And some of the kickback on that tweet, I don't think people really understood the context. I wasn't blaming Tennessee for missing on him. I wasn't throwing shade at any of the coaching staff. I think they did a great job. I think Nico did a great job. They obviously made it tough on him, and it came right down to the wire, and he's got to pick one or the other. The kid preferred Miami. He preferred South Beach. He preferred that lifestyle and whatever Miami was offering. That's just going to happen. Like I said earlier, you cannot control that at all. But when you're that close to landing a kid, a 5-star offensive tackle, somebody's going to anchor your offensive line for at least 3 years, you hope, and you miss out at the very last moment to another program that's in the same situation as you, like you mentioned, yeah, that's brutal. I mean, I feel like Tennessee's coaches probably felt the same way. It's probably like a gut punch. Like, we were so close to landing this kid. Well, that doesn't really matter because you didn't get him. So, yeah, it feels like a brutal miss. And some of the pushback on it was insane. Oh, you're being so negative and this and that. And then I wrote something this morning about why Tennessee fans shouldn't freak out, kind of the conversation that we're having right now. And I even got responses to that tweet. That's where the 3-star you comments and, oh, you're just making excuses. I'm like, okay, it's just, you cannot win. You cannot win in this conversation at all.
Yeah, because you're going to have the people that want to be eternal optimists right now, and you're going to have the people that want to be pessimists, and they're going to be warring over this situation when the truth is it sounds lame, but it really is somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, it is what it is. It's just the situation.
Yeah, there is the fact that you got to win more games. You got to become an even more attractive program. You got to go, hey, we can win 10 games in a season. Come on down, because the chance of us winning a championship is real now. And then on top of that, you got to throw around big money in the NIL market, which Tennessee's already doing. You got that down. Although we did talk about, you mentioned it there has been some rumblings that have actually been confirmed by reporters that kind of Danny White has said, hey, let's be careful with the NIL stuff. I don't remember the exact details, and I don't want to misquote anybody or say anything, but I believe it was something like the Tennessee coaches cannot speak directly with the NIL just to kind of keep plausible deniability there or whatever, I believe was the case. Correct? Was that right? I think I'm remembering that right.
Here's his quote.
Okay.
There's still an NCAA rule that specifically says we cannot be involved in any kind of NIL or any kind of inducement activity in recruiting. So there's a line between recruiting and current student athletes that we have been very strict about with our coaches and staff, and we will continue to be. I like where we are in that space. So basically what you're saying, current student athletes, yeah, you can get them NIL deals. Recruits, prohibited. White has made it clear that there's that line there. Which there's still a ton of gray area even then, because your collective is supposedly the one negotiating.
And I know, and I know some people that's going to freak some people out and go like, oh no, it's going to kill the NIL. Now we're not going to be in that space. That doesn't give me really any evidence of almost anything. Think you can, first of all, the school can still have contact with this NIL and just have it be.
There are things
use a burner phone
publicly too.
Yeah, meet with them in secret in person. Use a burner phone. I mean, it's that simple. Like there's ways for them to keep in contact with these guys and coordinate and do all of those things. That could still absolutely happen. You just have to be careful about it. That's the whole thing. That's what I've always said about Saban. He cheats like everybody else, but he keeps it under wraps. He never gets caught. So there you go. It's that simple. Just don't ever get caught. But as far as that goes, I think that may be a factor. But I don't think it's going to be as big of a factor as people probably want it to be in this situation. I think there are just some things that put Tennessee at a disadvantage right now, just in the way that you are rebuilding. If you're in a situation like this where you're battling against a school that's in a really attractive city, that's putting up the same kind of money that you are, and so, all things being equal, the kid might just go, I want to go to this school more. Like there are just some factors that are working against you at times, because you can't just go, when things are equal like that, where the other school is putting up the same money as you, Tennessee can't just go, hey, we won a national championship. We won an SEC championship. Come on down. That's not something that Tennessee can say. They can't even say that we've had a double-digit win season in the last, 15 years. Like that's brutal. But that's what you have to fight through and just what has to be done. And I think you're exactly right with the transfer portal. That really... to me, that is the strategy that I would turn to, and I hope they do. And to some extent, they have. You got Brew McCoy coming in, some guys like that. But that is a point of emphasis that I would make. We'll see exactly what they do. But
commitments,
you got to start landing some of these guys. I don't know. You got to start landing them.
Well, commitments just don't mean as much now as they used to, because it doesn't mean that that's where that kid is going to stay for 3 or 4 years. It doesn't even mean. Signing doesn't even mean anything anymore, because you can still transfer. We saw kids that have signed, got out of their NLI, their national letter of intent, and played elsewhere that next season, or especially if a coach is fired or a big position coach that you were close with changes jobs or something. There's so many different factors that doesn't even really mean anything anymore. It's all about the team that you have when you hit the field on opening day and almost week to week, because we saw it with Eric Gray and others that you can just leave whenever you want to, which is completely insane that that's become the norm. Because I remember when it happened with Jalen Hurd in 2016, he was, it's impacted his reputation among Tennessee fans greatly, even though he was really one of the all-time greats to play at Tennessee. If he would have stayed, he probably would have been the all-time rushing leader by the time he was done. He was a really good player. And you wouldn't even blink an eye at that now. Eric Gray did it, and it's just like, yeah, you lost that guy to Oklahoma. That's no, dang, what do we do? Now it's just the way it goes now. So I don't think there should be as much panic over losing a recruit, just because of all the different factors and just the way the sport has evolved over the last couple of years. Obviously, you want to land those guys for momentum. The more guys you have committed, the more likely you are to get even better players. I don't think it's, the end of the world. There's also one other thing that played into this too that I think you got to consider outside of NIL money is the fact that, Josh Heupel landed Nico obviously partially because of the NIL, but let's not act like Tennessee was the only one offering the number 2 or 3 quarterback in the country an NIL deal. He still chose Tennessee because he wants to play there. Part of that's because of Heupel, Alex Golesh, Joey Housley, the quarterbacks coach. Like, that's what they're known for. They develop quarterbacks. They put up huge numbers. Well, Mario Cristobal, ex-offensive line coach, he was at Oregon. He was recruiting Mauigoa when he was at Oregon. They have a relationship. He coaches his position. So it's natural that he kind of gravitated towards Cristobal. That's not shocking in that aspect.
Yeah, that's a good point. So that's basically the take as far as that goes. You did also, we've kind of skipped over this completely with that conversation because people kind of got an ill feeling after Mauigoa chose Miami, but Tennessee actually got a 5-star player over the weekend. He's 2024 5-star player, so an extra year on for Mauigoa. But Jonathan Eccles, who
just an hour after Mauigoa.
Yeah, it was right after the number 5 edge rusher in the class of 2024, according to On3, the number 35 player nationally. I mean, it's a huge pickup for 2024. And really, it kind of went, I sort of feel bad for the kid because it sort of went not unnoticed, but it was a little bittersweet because you sort of go like, this is great. We love that. But you also whiffed on a huge recruit that we really could have used a little more immediately. And so that's a great pickup. And I love that they got this guy in the fold. Also, and a note on that, he's also from IMG Academy. So that's clearly
major.
Yes. Niedermeyer didn't get in his ear.
Tennessee had all the momentum going into that commitment, and it would have been a huge upset if he would have chose somebody other than Tennessee. I mean, nobody really thought that he was going to go anywhere else. So if he would have not committed to Tennessee yesterday, I think we could have officially be on like Brian Niedermeyer super concern watch.
Yeah.
Because Carnell Tate, wide receiver, Ohio State. Mauigoa, offensive line, Miami. Like, it all kind of adds up. But you start losing. I mean, this guy, he's going to be a tight end, I think, is what they're kind of projecting him to be. I know he's an athlete, but they're thinking tight end. So, if you miss on him, there's definitely some concern. Like, is Tennessee ever going to get another IMG player as long as Niedermeyer's there? Because that's a pretty big school that you need to be getting players from. I mean, those were players coming from all over the country. I believe Eccles is from Georgia originally. Mauigoa, obviously American Samoa. Carnell Tate from Chicago. Like, these guys aren't native to Florida. You got some of the best players in the country going down there to play football. You need to get some of those guys. So maybe Niedermeyer doesn't have as much of an influence as at least we hope he doesn't.
Yeah, hopefully not. And this, I think with this Eccles commitment, it kind of goes to something we talked about last week, where it sort of felt like in some of these battles, Heupel has missed because he didn't have the long-standing relationship. This is specifically with Carnell Tate. Ohio State and Ryan Day just had more time. Ryan Day has been there for years and has had time to work on this kid. And Heupel just hasn't been. He wasn't talking to Carnell Tate at UCF. That was not the type of player he was going after.
Yeah.
And so you're working from behind as far as that goes. With Eccles, I mean, this is one, you're getting this kid an entire year ahead of his time. He's a 2024 class.
And he's the first guy in that class. Landing a 5-star as your first commit is big.
And this is where I was going. You show with more time to work. You got way more time to work with this class. I mean, hopefully they've been working on the 2024 class since the day Heupel showed up.
Yeah.
Because that's really what you have to do. You have to work years ahead of time in recruiting. But you have more time to work on this class, and the primary guy in the class is a 5-star. It's huge. It's really massive. I mean, even with this 2023 class, you are working from behind because there's just years where Heupel missed getting to know some of these kids. But now you're getting more time to build this 2024 class, and the foundation is a 5-star player. And I think that's huge. And it's a 5-star player that they're kind of working with because obviously in his I was looking at a interview. I mean, he's one of the main things that he said was the reason he wanted to come to Tennessee was that tight end factor. The Tennessee was going to accommodate that, and he obviously coming out, he's an edge rusher in the ratings, at least on three. And like you're kind of showing like, hey, we're willing. You're a cornerback in college. You want to play wide receiver? Let's talk about it. Some things like that. And I think this is a really good sign going forward. But the fruit of that labor, I mean, you're really not going to see it for a whole entire year from now when kids for that 2024 class start committing more. But that's great. It's a great pickup. It just felt kind of bittersweet with the Mauigoa news.
Well, if you need a little bit of, I wouldn't say optimism, but something to feel good about or to kind of take solace in, is the fact that Florida, and we've talked about this, is not doing well in recruiting at all right now, and they're losing players to Miami left and right. And Mauigoa is a player that they were going after, that they were kind of on his early list and stuff, and they faded badly. Like they weren't even in the conversation. So you can look at it's important to keep these recruiting losses in context. How is Tennessee doing on the whole compared to everybody? Talked about, they're number 10. You're going to win some, you're going to lose some, but for the most part, they're doing, I think, as good as you could hope. I mean, you got to have realistic expectations, right? Tennessee's not going to go out and get the number 1 class in the country coming off a 7-6 season after a disastrous 3-7 year where the head coach was fired. You got a whole brand new program, lots of challenges, your new culture, all that kind of stuff. I think top 10 really is about as realistically as good as you can hope. And they're outperforming a lot of other coaches in the SEC that are kind of media darlings. I mean, Shane Beamer, Billy Napier, guys that the national media seems to love, and they're not really on the same level as Tennessee in recruiting right now.
Yeah, they really aren't. Tennessee with 14 commits with the number 10 class, South Carolina with 13 commits, the number 27 class. So you are
that speaks volumes there, because you can't use the quantity excuse there. I mean, that's obviously what Tennessee has. That's what Tennessee has on Alabama right now, for example, right? But when it comes to South Carolina, a team that they're going to directly be compared to for the next couple of years, because they both had similar seasons with first-year head coaches last year. Tennessee, South Carolina, they've kind of followed the same path over the past 10 years or so. So that's really the program that's your closest comp right now. Obviously, you want that to change over the next couple of years. You want that comp to be Georgia and Auburn or Alabama and better teams. But right now, that's your best comp, and they're clearly out recruiting Shane Beamer.
Yeah, you're winning that battle, and that's great. So far, couple of losses. You wish you would have won this one with Mauigoa particularly, but is it the end of the world? No, it's not. And just win these going forward. Shandavian Bradley, that's going to be a huge one. Got to get that.
And that's one you got to beat Texas A&M and South Carolina for.
Yeah, I mean,
you cannot lose. We talked about this, but you cannot lose to South Carolina on that.
Cannot. Yeah, Texas A&M would be one thing where they got that oil money that they're throwing around, but I mean, right now you cannot afford a big recruiting loss to South Carolina. So we'll see. That's just it's a matter of time. We'll have to see what happens there. But the final topic of the show is really it's separate, but it really is part of this whole conversation because it really affects recruiting. It really affects the NCAA and the landscape of college football. But earlier in last week, UCLA, USC announced that they're going to the Big Ten, which that means that the Big Ten will have two teams in Los Angeles and a team in New Jersey. So it's they're pretty much covering the whole deal. They're kind of void from like Nebraska to California, but they still gonna have California schools, New Jersey schools, Ohio schools. Like they're geographically covering the gambit there now. And the Texas Oklahoma move almost felt inevitable because they were just such powerful programs, and the Big 12 has just kind of slowly become less and less relevant. They never make the playoff. They just, there's just something there that was just off, and you kind of felt like that was coming. This is the first time with the conference realignments where I personally, and I'm huge on this, I want the NCAA to be gone. Kiss them goodbye. They deserve to be dismantled completely. Like, I'm that kind of person. Like, create these super conferences because I want the structure of college sports to not involve the NCAA anymore. At least these major college sports that make tons of money. This was the first time where I went, ooh, okay, we're making moves now. Like, this is really, I think, the start, specifically because geographically, this just does not make sense. I mean, this is pretty ridiculous to have a school that is going to have to travel. I mean, how far is that if if UCLA
UCLA to
played at
Rutgers.
Rutgers?
Yeah.
Like, what is that travel like? A 3-hour difference, thousands of miles of travel. It's a
You got to
6
leave.
hour
I mean,
plane
you almost
ride.
got to leave a couple of days early, really, to adjust.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Jet lag literally would be a factor in an in-conference game. That's crazy. And so to me, this is the first real sign of the super conference. I mean, Texas and Oklahoma was that. The SEC is gunning for that. The SEC is gunning for the super conference for sure. But to me, this was like the first truly shameless, kind of out of nowhere. They supposedly, according to the reports around it, UCLA and USC had joined the alliance or whatever with the ACC and something else where they verbally had committed to not realigning or whatever, and they just stabbed all those people in the back. Apparently, this is big. Is it making you uncomfortable, Zach, or are you a fan?
I'm kind of in the middle. I understand that the evolution of the sport has to happen for the NCAA to go away, which obviously needs to happen. But then the part of me, the nostalgic part of me that grew up watching the 12-team SEC or the 9-team ACC or the actual Big Ten when there was 10 teams in it, like just the traditional conferences, the rivalries. I wish that all that would have been able to stay intact and the NCAA go away. I mean, I understand why it has to happen, and the games are the games, so it's not that big of a deal. It's just kind of the traditionalist part of me, which there's certain things I like more than others. I don't know. I'm like you. I understood Texas and Oklahoma. It felt inevitable. It doesn't feel natural, but it felt inevitable. But this doesn't feel natural. It didn't feel inevitable, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's obviously all for television money, and that's the big kind of standoff right now. Is it just kind of load up on teams for television rights, and they get all that money. I don't know where it goes from here, though. That's the thing. It's like there's no obvious answer, and I've ran through so many scenarios in my head. Like, what kind of super conferences are we going to get? Who's the last conference standing in all this? What happens to the teams that aren't in one of those conferences? What kind of shot do they have? How does that impact those student athletes and their opportunities? It's just a weird thing where the future of the sport's uncertain. Obviously, it's going to survive. There's so much money involved. It's going to survive. It's going to be fine. It's just going to look a lot different than what we're used to. So I don't know what the end game in all this is. I kind of tweeted a little bit about, like a 30-team mega SEC conference where you go and you get, Oklahoma State, West Virginia, some of these, Virginia Tech, maybe Clemson, some of these other teams that might be looking around. And you come up with a scheduling concept of, you put maybe the traditional SEC on one side and you play 3 permanent opponents and a couple of random opponents from your side every year, and then 3 random opponents from the other side, and then maybe one team from outside of all this. And then you have your own little 4-game playoff, and the winner of that gets to go to a national championship playoff or something. I don't know. I don't know what it looks like, but there's so many different scenarios that can play out, and what makes the most sense. I mean, I don't think anybody knows. I don't think the powers that be know either where this is headed.
Everybody keeps talking about, oh, well, it's just becoming pro football. And to me, again, and I know this is not everybody's stance. I'm fully aware that this is a pretty divisive stance. to take, I go, yeah, thank goodness. It's about time. This is the way that it should have been. Like, to me, I think if you can get to 20 teams in the SEC, that is where it would be kind of big enough to break away. You add, first of all, I would drop Vandy and Mizzou, kick them out. Everybody, if you follow me on Twitter, you know that I'm on a crusade to have them ejected from the SEC. They're useless parasites. Get them out. And then you bring in, Virginia Tech, West Virginia, Clemson, North Carolina, Miami, who just build the roster from there of power schools and make the league amazing. Like, would it not be so amazing to have all of these great schools all in one giant league? And I know a lot of people are worried about the loss of rivalries and things like that. I mean, how many truly seminal rivalries would have to be saved? Genuinely. Like, I guess for Tennessee, Alabama, and Florida, I think you could salvage 2 games a year, right? I mean, that, people love the automatic win against Vandy, but if Vandy got shaved off the schedule, Tennessee football would become a better product. Like, there's just some things like that where you go like, yeah, I mean, it's the cross-state rivalry or whatever. First of all, it's not really a rivalry because you beat them. I mean, so far, it's been a rough decade. But before then, you beat them like 30 years in a row, Like, it was just not even a rivalry historically. And some of that stuff gets shaved off. And it's that for the long-term betterment, the way that I looked at it is this realignment is sort of like direct to consumer goods rather than working through a wholesaler, I guess. So like cars have to go to a dealership and they have to go through that third party dealership and you buy them through the dealership and blah, 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 blah. And then like Tesla came along and they said, what if you bought the car directly from us? And we're going to make the rules for this. We're going to be the dealership. And now, it, in a lot of ways, it can be a better alternative. And I think this is kind of that. You cut out the NCAA. You go, we're not doing no more dealership. You're out of here. We make the rules now. And you can, it's a little more of where if there are problems, it's more easily adjudicated because there's no third party that you have to go to and the NCAA has to approve all this stuff. And there's the board of all this garbage. Cut all that out. Cut out the bureaucracy. Let's get right to it. Like, there's some advantages like that I see in this that I think some people probably aren't thinking of it that way. And maybe that can reframe it for some people that's basically what's happening here. It's becoming direct to consumer college football, and to me, that it should be with a big asterisk, a very good thing. I think in the long term. I mean, just think if you had that 20-team league, the parasites are kicked out, and you have nothing but amazing games on the schedule always. Like, that's amazing. Like, that would be great. Would it not? Like, I know people want to kind of have more snoozer games, like, oh, we need more wins. Well, what if we just elevated the level of competition? And I don't know that that's necessarily what makes it better. Like, yeah, I like having those wins on the schedule, but ultimately a better product is seeing Tennessee play North Carolina rather than Tennessee playing Vandy. It just that's how I look at it. This UCLA USC move is weird, but it's a step in that direction, and so I'm really for it at the end of the day. And I know a lot of people aren't gonna love that, but it just is. That's how I see it, and I think it's gonna be SEC, Big Ten, and maybe one more when it eventually shakes out. Some people think it's just gonna be the SEC and the Big Ten in these massive conferences. I don't know exactly how that would work, but I'm for it so far, depending on how it all eventually shakes out.
I think so. I found my tweet here, and this is what I had kind of formulated in my head, and it's maybe it makes sense, maybe it doesn't, but kind of on the same page. I think this is how it could play out and how it maybe will if you take a 28 team or 30 team SEC, because there's 5 Power 5 conferences. There's probably 60 some schools, 70 schools total in all those conferences, maybe together, somewhere around that number, maybe 75. I know the ACC's had like 18 members for a little while now, but So you're probably looking at 2 super conferences with about 30 teams in it, because inevitably some teams will get left out. I don't think anybody's racing to include Kansas in one of their new conferences. I don't think Vanderbilt's going to go anywhere. I mean, I get what you're saying, but I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think Missouri. I think once you're in, you're kind of in. But my proposal would be like a 28, 30 team mega SEC, depending on, I'm not sure what the final number would be, but you have your traditional SEC teams, your 14 pre-Oklahoma and Texas on one side, the new members starting with Oklahoma and Texas on the other side. And, it could include the West Virginia, North Carolina, Miami, Virginia Tech, whoever, Baylor, maybe some schools like that would make sense. Play a 9-game conference schedule, play 3 permanent opponents. You could have Alabama, Florida. It would probably be Vanderbilt because of the in-state thing. That would be your permanent, but like that's just probably how it would work out. Then play 4 that rotate from your side. So you're still going to be playing most of those SEC opponents pretty often, because I mean that's what 3, 4, 8. I mean that's basically 6 other teams that you're rotating 4 games with every couple of years. So you're going to play those teams pretty often. Then you play 2 from the other side. You can kind of rotate that through. So you play every team. I guess it would be like every 7 years you would at least play every single team. That leaves 3 games. Maybe you play a team from the other mega conference. You play a group of 5 team or whatever that turns out to be, independent. I don't know what that would look like, but you play one of those, and then maybe you play a money game. A UT Martin or somebody that kind of you pay to come helps fund those programs. I get it. If you don't go that route, I've floated before that you could play a spring exhibition game where you play those teams, which I love the idea of. I love the idea of a scrimmage, like an actual scrimmage.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't feel like you're at any more risk of an injury than you would be at a typical spring game. I mean, most of those injuries that happen in just a random practice anyway that time of year. So you can't really control that. You can't control injuries. So that would be one avenue you could take. And then, like I mentioned before, you would have like your own 4-game conference playoff. So then you're up to 14 games on the schedule. That leads you into the college football playoff, presumably staying at 4 teams. You got your conference winners, your automatic bid, and then maybe you go just best resume after that. 16 teams for the 2 teams that made it to the 16 games. I mean, for the 2 teams that made it to the very end, 1 extra game a year. Maybe you keep your bowl game kind of structure intact. I'm not sure how that would look, but there's ways to make it work and still look like the college football that we all grew up loving, just with kind of a new spin on it.
I think everybody there's a serious case to be made that college football would be an even better product at that point. You know what it would really be great for is college basketball. When you just get like a rotating menu of awesome matchups, and it's really varied. It's not just like, oh, Tennessee plays South Carolina twice a year, then you play them again in the SEC tournament, and you would really get a lot of variety that way. Like if you got to go, like if you brought Virginia into the league and Tennessee got to go play at the JPJ, John Paul Jones over there, like that would be so fun. That would be awesome to be able to get that on the schedule. I'm a huge advocate for it. I think it would be good. I mean, if nothing else, when you get that direct to consumer model, like I was talking about, that's even more money coming in the door for everybody, because you cut out a man that you got to give a check to.
Which
the
is
NCAA is not a factor anymore. Yeah, I mean, the money's all coming
anyway.
to you.
It's driving all this anyway. So
yeah. So I don't know how it will shake out. What you just described would be cool with me. It would be better than what we're working with right now, because college football as a product is really at a crossroads where you just have these dominant teams. They play in the playoff every single year, and it's boring. And it needs a shakeup. It needs a serious shakeup. And I know people really want to hang on to the tradition there, and I think you can do some amount of both. You can't have everything. You just can't. That's not the way that it works. But you can do some amount of both, and it can still work out. And I think personally, it really works for a school like Tennessee, because I think the goal at this point with the godfathers of college football at the moment, your Greg Sankeys and guys like that, who are the heads of these leagues, they got to be thinking about more parity and how to bring that in, because I know everybody thinks that he just loves Alabama and that they do everything for the sake of Alabama. That ultimately that is not the case. Tennessee is a huge moneymaker. Alabama's a huge moneymaker. LSU is a huge moneymaker. I mean, they all drive a lot for the SEC, and it would be good for everybody to succeed. And I think they got to be looking at that. And this model we're talking about would help that. In my personal opinion, I think NIL is already helping that. As you can see, a player like a 5-star offensive lineman who would typically go to an Alabama or Georgia is going to Miami, could be going to Tennessee, should have been going to Tennessee, and so I think in the long run, this is the right move. But any other thoughts on that, Zach, before we head out? We're running up on like an hour 10 here.
No, I mean, I'm just anxious to see how it all turns out, but it's going to take quite a while. I'm with you. I don't think there's this big Greg Sankey Alabama bias. I think Georgia winning the national championship this past year, while we hated it, it's ultimately good for the SEC because that's a team that's not Alabama or not LSU, really the only other team that's kind of had success over the last decade at a national level, winning a championship. I think they would love for Tennessee to go 15-0 and win a championship. That would be huge for the SEC. It'd be huge for television. It would be great for them. The same goes for Ole Miss, Auburn, any of those programs making a run. It's been a while since Auburn, won with Cam Newton. It's been over a decade now. So Florida, same thing with Florida. I mean, I think they would love that too. So yeah, I agree there. I think they want all the teams to succeed. I think it's better for business when that happens.
But can't say this. There is a partiality to Saban. I think he's the longest tenured coach in the SEC.
I think he gets his way for sure.
Yeah, they do a little bowing down to Saban because he has so much pull, so much influence, has won so much, is so powerful as a coach and a figure that they defer to a lot of what he wants and his needs, which is why I really loved, as stupid as the whole situation was, and we talked about it at length on the show here when it happened, but I liked Jimbo calling him out. Somebody needed to do it. It's needed to happen for 10 years now.
Well, I think that was the frustration from exactly what you're saying, because he probably sees that up close on a monthly basis. Yeah.
So there is that. But that's it. Charlie Burris, Zach Ragan, the Big Orange Podcast. Thanks so much for listening. Go check out the YouTube if you want to see the pictures that we showed earlier. At Charlie_Burris, at Zach TNT, at A to Z Sports, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook.com/A to Z Sports, Nashville, A to Z Sports.com for all the stuff that we write on the old internets. What am I forgetting? Oh, the A to Z Sports Podcast Network feed. But if you've made it this far, you know where it is. Some videos are going to pop up over our face that are also on the A to Z Sports YouTube channel. If you're watching on YouTube, click on those if you want to keep watching. Blah, blah, blah. I think that's everything that I got. Thanks again for listening, and we'll talk to y'all next week.
See you guys later.